Hey besties, hi. I hope you're all doing well because it's time for another bear bedtime story. Now, as you can see, today we are not whispering, it's soft spoken because we wanted to do something different for those of you that love soft spoken. If you are new here, every Wednesday we have Bear Bedtime Stories where I read you a fictional 3-chapter, very short, don't worry, story, and basically it's bear themed and just to help you sleep. So let's start with tonight's story, The Tailor of the Heavy Seams. Chapter 1, The House of the Wooden Spool. In a shallow dip between two corduroy hills lived a bear named Barnaby. Again, another Barnaby. We've had plenty of stories with Barnaby, and today we have Barnaby again. Barnaby was a threadbare with dense indigo fur that looked like brushed denim and heavy padded paws that never snagged. He lived inside a massive hollowed-out wooden spool that had washed ashore from some ancient river of giants. Inside his spool house, the walls were lined with thick skeins of yarn, not bright or loud colors, but quiet tones of oatmeal, charcoal, and deep slate gray. Barnaby's job was to be the tender of the seams. You see, the hills in this valley were stitched together. Over time, as the wind blew and the earth stretched, the giant threads holding the hills together would grow loose, making a soft flapping sound that kept the valley restless. Every night, Barnaby would step out onto the porch, carrying a giant wooden needle and a spool of thick waxed hemp thread that smelled of beeswax and pine. And that is the end of chapter 1. Let's move together now to chapter 2. I'm sorry if I mispronounce any words. Chapter 2, The Tightening of the Ridge. One crisp evening, the air had a slight chill, and the Tweed Ridge to the west was humming. Because the stitch at the top of the ridge had frayed, the wind was slipping underneath the fabric, creating a rhythmic, hollow whistling sound. Whiff, 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 whiff. A tiny loom pupa named Mitzi, a caterpillar whose body was made of soft, unspun cotton, crawled slowly onto Barnaby's porch. "Barnaby," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of tissue paper. "The bridge is flapping. The cold air is getting underneath and my cocoon is shaking." Barnaby gave a slow, reassuring nod. He slung the heavy rope of hemp over his shoulder and began his slow, heavy march up the corduroy hill. Thump, shh, thump, shh, thump, shh, thump, shh. His paws made a satisfying textured sound as they brushed against the ridges of the fabric. When he reached the frayed seam, he didn't hurry. He sat down in the valley, his heavy denim fur pressing into the soft earth. He threaded his giant needle. Slide, pull, lock. Slide, pull, lock. Slide, pull, lock. He began to stitch the two hills back together. Push, click, drag. Push, click, drag. Push, click, drag. The sound of the wooden needle piercing the thick tweed was a deep, muffled thwip. Then came the long, slow sound of the waxed thread being pulled through the eyelet. He worked with a steady, hypnotic rhythm, closing the gap inch by inch, sealing out the wind and tucking the hills back into the dark. And that is the end of chapter 2. Let's move together now to chapter 3, the final chapter, The Knotted Night. By the time Barnaby reached the peak of the ridge, the whistling had completely stopped. The fabric of the earth was tight, smooth, and heavy once more. He tied a massive triple knot in the hemp rope, pulling it tight with his jaws until it locked with a solid fibrous thud. The valley was perfectly insulated now. The hills lay flat and still under the moonlight, looking like a great, heavy patchwork quilt pulled up over the sleeping world. Barnaby felt the deep weave settling into his muscles. His limbs felt wonderfully heavy, as if they were made of the same dense denim as his fur. He tramped slowly back to his spool house, the air completely silent around him. He did not lock his door. There was no need. He climbed into his bed, which was a massive nest made of discarded wool blankets and oversized skeins of soft alpaca yarn. Sorry. He curled his large body into the center, the wool rising up to meet his chin. He listened to the absolute stillness he had sown into the earth. Barnaby let out one final long breath. A deep, rustling exhale that sounded like a heavy curtain closing. He closed his eyes, his mind sinking into the dark weave of the night, and fell into a sleep that was warm, secure, and completely unbroken. That is the end, besties. I hope you enjoyed the story. Even though I stuttered and mispronounced a couple of words, I'm really sorry. Good night, besties. I love you so much. Good night.